I'm Meredith Richards, and welcome to our third in a series of forums on understanding government. These forums are brought to you by the Democratic Road Forward PAC and its supporters as a public service to contribute to greater civic awareness and understanding of the institutions of government, particularly local government, with an emphasis on the practical issues of how government works, what it does, the relationships between different levels of government, and how they affect our community and our everyday lives. We value a diversity of political views and have taken care to keep these forums nonpartisan and to a great extent, at least to what extent possible, non-political. Our speakers have long histories of public service in their professional careers, elective office, and academic disciplines. With these forums, the Road Forward PAC is continuing in the tradition of its founder, Delegate Mitch Van Neres, the late Delegate Mitch Van Neres, who believed in the Jeffersonian principle that an informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny. He established the PAC as a means of encouraging and nurturing political activism at the grassroots, and he had great faith in both the wisdom and the good faith of the electorate. Tonight's forum is on regionalism, with the focus on the many ways in which Charlottesville and Albemarle County, along with other jurisdictions in the Thomas Jefferson Planning District, have forged cooperative agreements and joint authorities in the past. We will learn about the important role of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission in initiating collaborative ventures and joint planning among the jurisdictions in the region. And finally, we hope to learn more about some of the constraints that limit regional solutions, and we will hear about the prospects for future cooperation among our jurisdictions. We're grateful to Mr. Ed Barber, a former member of the board of the Road Forward PAC, for sponsoring tonight's forum in memory of Paul Saunier, who was a dear friend and a benefactor for our PAC. We couldn't bring you these forums without our sponsors. After tonight's forum, the remaining sessions deal with the topics of, that's tonight's forum, regionalism, jurisdictions working together to develop effective solutions. Future forums after tonight, public education, meeting the needs of our children in today's challenging times on May 11th. Law enforcement and the criminal justice system on May 25th, and how zoning and land use planning shape the world around us, the last one on June 8th. RSVPs are not required. They're all in this facility from 7 to 9 p.m. If you care to sign up to receive notices of the remaining forums, and that's all you'll be signing up for, is to get notices, please sign the sheets that are coming around. Could you maybe pass them around and let them, yeah. And please sign those sheets. We have 3 of them going around on clipboards. And you will receive individual notices of each of the upcoming forums. If you will hold your questions until after the speakers have made their presentations, and then at that time all the speakers will be available for questions and answers. Let's see, we provided index cards and pens at each table. Should be on your table for writing down your questions, and when you have a question written down, just raise your hand and one of our board members will come and pick it up, and then we'll present it to the speakers. So that is my introduction. I have our speakers' beautiful pictures here. They're about to be introduced by Miss Cynthia Neff, who is a member of the board of directors of the Road Forward PAC.
Thank you. Oh, look. I just got tall by standing on Meredith's platform. What a trick. Anyway, hi, my name is Cynthia, and it's a pleasure to be here. We are so lucky. These are the people who actually live and breathe and make regionalism in this community work. For people like me who aren't natives and who come here, you struggle from the very beginning with why is there a Charlottesville, why is there an Albemarle, why the hell don't we do some of this stuff together? And then you find out as you learn more that we actually do. We do a lot of stuff together. And some of it, it's very clever. And especially, I think, that's what we're going to learn a little bit about for people who don't know, because it takes you living here a little while to learn about the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission and all that they do. And when you find out all that they do and how close they work with both the city and the county, and not only us, but our neighbors, it's pretty amazing. So Nancy, what many of you don't know, was Nancy O'Brien not only the first female mayor of Charlottesville, she also spent 17 years on the Planning District Commission and director. She was a poobah. She's still a poobah. If you are a woman interested in democratic politics in this town, trust me, you know Nancy O'Brien. Most of us have been to her house many times and worked on campaigns. She's amazing. But she's also been amazing, and I think as she's looked back, I think we'll gain the benefit of all of the years she spent doing this and how it got here and the lessons learned from the early 70s. When it was established in 1972, so we're really lucky to have her here. She was also married to a guy who I thought was one of the sweetest men on the planet here, and I've worked with him on a board as well. The next Chip Boyles, he's probably the least well known of our panelists, but a fun guy from Louisiana. If you look, he spent a lot of time in the South. He understands the ways of the South and Southerners, with being educated in South Carolina and then spending a lot of time working in redevelopment and development communities in Louisiana. I asked him, had he gotten used to was he a Virginian yet? Had he gotten used to Charlottesville? Was he having fun? And he said, it's actually, the job is a tremendous fun here, but he does kind of miss those New Orleans times and Baton Rouge, and so we may want to take him out drinking one day. Our next speaker is the Honorable Mike Signer. I remember meeting him when he ran for Lieutenant Governor in 2009 and becoming quite fond of him then, and I have continued to be fond of him. He works for Willow Trees Apps, and he's still speaking a lot and giving lectures, but he wrote this book on Madison, and one of my best friends, Kat Imhoff, runs Montpelier, and so anything about the Constitution and James Madison is always of interest. So, and if you haven't ever read it, it's really quite good. And then the last but not least person is Diantha McKeel, who's not only my supervisor, but is my friend. And not that we talk a lot of politics, but it's actually, I happen to know most of these people, and the fact that they really care about our community and what's working and what's not, and even when we argue. And I ran into Diantha today, and because we are friends, I figured she wouldn't care if I told. We ran into each other as we pulled up to a stop sign or a stoplight, and rolled down the window, and I said, "Why did you sue this city the day before our meeting?"
To get more people.
And so we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Very crafty.
So anyway, I think these are four of the most amazing people, and that can really help us understand this. And so welcome, give them a big welcome. And Meredith is going to run up and shut this down, and while Nancy's coming over here. And you can stand on this little pedestal.
I don't get on a pedestal very often.
I know, this is your big chance to be on a pedestal. How are you?
So we're all wonderful people, and so are you. I'm really glad to see so many people here tonight. I wasn't sure, nor I guess is anybody ever sure when they open up a discussion if anybody's going to come. If you bicycled here, you might have talked to somebody, but probably you didn't. This is really a big thing. I'm Nancy O'Brien, as she said, and I served as planning district director for, I guess, about 17 years, and lived to tell it. Can you not hear me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you, but don't change the volume there.
Down?
No.
Okay.
Just move the mic over.
Do you want me to stand back?
No, move the mic over.
So often you have to eat these things for them to. You want me to stand over here? Does that work?
Or we can move the mic over.
Where do you want it? Because I was too close to the speaking back.
Now try.
Is this working? Can you hear me?
Yes.
If you can't hear me at any point during this, just raise your hand and I'll try to talk louder, or I'll get friendlier with the microphone. So I was asked to come here, and I also served on the commission as chairman for 2 years, in the second year of its life. In the late 60s and during the 60s, there was a great deal of emphasis on planning. It was a big deal for locally, it was a big deal for the state, and it was a big deal nationally. There was this idea that you could have plans in place, and then you could judge what you were doing in light of those plans and see whether it was efficient or would be effective. And that was one of the drivers to getting the planning districts created by the state. There was a commission called the Hahn Commission. He was president of Virginia Tech at the time. And as a result of their studying how localities were being impacted by growth and by, this is going to sound familiar, but by deteriorating infrastructure, or infrastructure that needed to be built, like roads and water and that sort of thing. And in the wisdom of the state, which isn't always true, they decided that planning districts were a good way to go. This was after a failed try 5 years earlier to that. So they recommended planning districts be formed throughout the state, and I left out pages of paper, and the colored side of it shows where the 21 planning districts are, and you can find us, we're number 10. And they were put together to recognize that growth and infrastructure problems transcended local boundaries and needed some other place than a locality alone to work on them. And so I'm just sort of curious, we've done a lot, but I'm sort of curious what you all think regional issues are. Can you come up with some regional issues? I mean, I want you to talk. Can you say something?
Water.
Water.
Transportation.
Transportation.
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Housing.
Housing.
Education.
Education.
Libraries.
Libraries.
Shared recreation facilities.
Shared recreation facilities, right? We did one of those too. I just thought maybe it would help you start thinking a little regionally to ask you what they were. This commission, the commissions in general were put together in 1968 under the Virginia Area Development Act. This is the last of those formed. And while we say we do more things together, and this has been true throughout the history of Charlottesville and Albemarle, the 50 some odd years that I've lived here, we do a lot together. But we were the very last to form a planning district. They're voluntary, so we didn't have to do it at all. But eventually, thanks to, I believe, mostly the League of Women Voters, the idea took root and it formed. At the time of its formation, not all of the localities chose to be part of it. So Louisa County was not part of it. It was Charlottesville and Albemarle, Greene, Fluvanna, and Nelson. And it took us 3 years to get Louisa to join. The time we went out to meet with Louisa Board of Supervisors, we met in a courthouse that had recently had the judge shot. And we're in there having this conversation about regionalism, and all of a sudden the lights all went out. Well, we didn't know whether to run or go under the table. But whatever it was, the lights came back on, and eventually we got Louisa into the planning district. I don't know whether they were scared of the lights going out. I mean, we were newcomers, we didn't belong there, so, but that was sort of a scary thing. So Louisa did come in. They felt really, I think, they were more related to Richmond than to here. And when you look at that map, almost everybody's related to something else other than the planning district that they're in. So as time has evolved, we have sort of fringe planning efforts that go on. Often Nelson works with the Lynchburg group. Louisa and Flugana often work on things with Richmond. And so at first that seemed really unsettling, but it wasn't. Eventually it all worked out. The membership when we started was equal urban and rural. The two urban areas, the city of Charlottesville and the county of Albemarle, had 4 representatives, and all the 4 rural places had 2. And the reason for that was the city and the county did not want to be outvoted at any time by rural interests. So it took a little bouncing along before people got comfortable enough with themselves to actually work like a region. Somebody in the article that was in the Progress recently said you have to till the ground or toil the soil very well. And the reason for that is that there's so much turf out there, and there still is turf, and when you want to work together, you have to get over that turf in some way or other. The list on the front of the paper that I let out here lists all the duties that we were given by the legislation. I didn't think it was particularly interesting to read a list, so I'm not going to read that to you. But, because you all would have fallen asleep by the time I got to the bottom one. But I wanted to say something about how we functioned, which isn't exactly along the lines of the duties. We functioned as a think tank. We functioned as a place to do experimental planning. We provided a detached viewpoint to local governments when they were trying to work out things, iron on things. We had adequate time to do research. We provided technical support. We acted like a temporary staffing agency. We were a convener of groups to meet, and we facilitated, and we acted as a consultant. In addition, we were a lobbyist. So those were the things we actually did. I don't know if they fit into that list of what we were supposed to do or not, but I do need to say that the list of what we were supposed to do came with very little money, which is something, we had no mandate, but we did get state money, but it wasn't enough to do even one of those things very well. As time went on, I felt like we had a couple of regional, 2 at least, victories. One was when the city and county decided they didn't really need to have a 50-50 vote. Part of that was, I think some of them were tired of coming to meetings, because all elected officials do is go from one meeting to another. And I appreciate you being here, you two, because I know you're everywhere. So the city was able, and the Albemarle County was able to feel comfortable working with these people from these rural areas. They didn't know each other. It was very difficult. And they all assumed a lot of things about each other that turned out to be not quite true. And then when the rubber really hit the road was when we developed the home money, and we got home money. I'll explain that later. But the city and the county agreed to equal distribution of that money. That was federal money, sizable amounts of federal money coming into the region for housing. But it was agreed to do it equally because the resources weren't exactly the same throughout the district. And those two sound like little things, or they may sound like little things, but they really were a change in how the governments work together. The other thing that we did, one of the convening things we did, was we brought together the chief administrative people, the city manager, and all the administrators in the county, at least quarterly, just for lunch. Because then they could talk very casually about things they were having trouble with. And so sometimes the rural people put a new light on what was going on in the city, and sometimes Albemarle could share some of their experiences and help the more rural places alone. At this time, these rural localities didn't have planning departments, all of them. They didn't have planners on the staff. There was no email, there was no voicemail. I mean, this was the dark ages. So it's hard to imagine how easy it is, and unfortunately sometimes how easy it is to communicate. And this was just the 70s. I mean, it wasn't that, it didn't seem that far, So what happens is planning districts are expected to accomplish what is on that list, but they don't. What they accomplish are what they are able to secure money for. And the money comes from local government, which is a per capita unless it's changed, and then from the state. Those two pieces of money are untapped. They're money that are not, there are no strings attached to that money. So what the planning district does is they leverage that. And in 5 years, they leverage something like $45 million. So it isn't peanuts what we get from the city and the county and the 4 rural areas, or the state. Because what we do at the planning district, and I'm sure Chip is doing this as hard as I did, because that's how you make it. You have to have money. You can't, nobody's out there planning because they love it. I mean, they are planning because they love it, but they're planning to get paid, get families, they would like
Mortgages.
Yeah, and mortgages. So, the first plans we did, we had 3 major ones. One was on aging. There was federal money to do a regional plan for aging. People were worried about all of us getting old then. We're still doing that. However, that plan was put together by the late Saunier. Okay. Not Paul. Jane, the late Jane Saunier, who is, I think, may still be the only one who put together a plan, which every chapter of which was headed by poetry. What that did was, that plan, what has evolved into the Jefferson Area Board for Aging. So when the plan was finished and that was proposed, I took around a joint exercise of power to each of the localities, which is a document that gets everybody to agree. And that's how JABA was formed, was through a plan at the planning district. In housing, we had to do what we called a windshield survey. And one of your board members, Sally Thomas, drove all over many a dirt road, examining housing in all the rural areas, found we really needed some help. And out of that, a smaller regional agency was formed called the Thomas Jefferson Housing Improvement Corporation. And that was formed to do housing repairs in the rural areas, because the Charlottesville Housing Foundation was already operating in Charlottesville and Albemarle, as were CHIP and AHIP. So that moved into an active housing program. What the planning district did at that time was they helped staff it, they harbored it until it was able to get out on its own. And that was another thing we did. We were sort of a harbor for nonprofit organizations. We put them under our wing and kept them alive until they were able to go out, just like mother hens. We put them out there, and then they did their thing. That happened with many, many things. And it was a good way to work. They didn't have the expertise to do some of the financial stuff for their grants, which are very complicated to run, and they didn't have much staff. So often somebody on our staff would be their part-time director. Those were the 2 main starting ones. The other thing we did was we educated the community. And lo and behold, at that time, one of the urgent issues in Charlottesville and Albemarle was the condition of the South Fork Urbana Reservoir. And it was filling in. And there was a lot of talk about it. And so the planning district convened the Board of Supervisors and the City Council at one meeting And I didn't know that I couldn't call a meeting of those two. I just called a meeting of them and they came. But the county sat up there, it was out at Piedmont, the county sat up there and we had to cajole them to come down and sit at the front table so that they could listen to the expertise from the University of Virginia about what was going on with the reservoir. And at the end of that, it was very funny, but the person who was sitting to my right stood up in great anger because he had learned a lot of things he didn't want to know, threw $10 down on the plate, said, I know what you want, you just want money to do things. And that was the beginning of a longer conversation. Where that went was we ended up doing studies. We ended up looking at the reservoir for the bathymetric study, and we also looked at the feasibility of going to the James River. So that was one of our education and convening operations. One of the things we had to do at the very beginning was review, we called them A95s because that was the Federal Register number. But we had to review all the grants that were generated in this area against a regional plan to see whether they were being duplicative or whether they fit the regional plan. And I'm here to tell you that was one big paper exercise. And one night we were there till 2 o'clock arguing over a health facility in Fluvanna County because two of us wouldn't give in. So eventually we decided that was a waste of our time and that got dropped. We went on and I'm trying to watch what I'm supposed to be saying. We went on and we had the Metropolitan, the MPO is housed at the planning district, which is an appropriate place for it because it covers Charlottesville and Albemarle. There was a great deal of discussion as to whether it should be there or not, or whether it should be an independent thing when it was organized. But it ended up, as did most of the MPOs, in the planning district. And so it has provided some funding for transportation and also sort of a neutral spot between some of the jurisdictions, not only the city and county, but also the 4 rural areas, because there's also rural planning that goes on. In the area of the environment, we did quite a few things. We had a study to preserve the environment, and that grew into a sustainability council. And that's what's on the flip side of the thing that you've been given. The Sustainability Council had a committee of about 20 or 30 people on it. And they did full studies, they did a build-out analysis of how much carrying capacity this region had. They looked at water, they looked at soil makeup, they looked at steep slopes, and combined that to show how much carrying capacity this region had. And then there were many other things that went into that. And anytime we could find somebody who would come up with a little bit of money to do a little bit of that study, we did it. And at the end of it, the group came up with these accords. These accords were adopted by every locality in the planning district. And we had a party to celebrate that. And I insisted that they have the party on the top of the Water Street garage, because there was a sustainable urban, I don't know if you go up there and look around, but there's a sustainable rural and a sustainable urban landscape when you're on the top of that garage. So I said, we gotta have it up there because it just encompasses all of what we're talking about. Well, out of great reluctance, we did have it up there, but that night there was an unbelievable rainstorm.
I remember that.
Yes, but everybody came and they signed the accords, and the rain was coming in like this, and the poor people had made food, and it was really a mess. But anyway, everybody signed it. It made a big difference, I think, in how people on the local level started looking at the comprehensive planning they were doing. And sustainability became an operational thing in this region. And I think maybe it's not as much so now, I'm pretty sure it isn't, but it is. It was then, and that was something we did. We also did an in-depth study of the Rivanna River Basin, and that evolved into what is now the Rivanna River Commission. So many things got born in the planning district. Some of them died because they probably weren't the right thing for the right time. Some of them lived and they're still around, and I'm now ready for Java. It's easier.
Thank you. If I can get this. Thank you all. As it was brought up earlier, I moved here most recently from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I had conversations with a couple of folks earlier, obviously, about Louisiana. Are there any folks here that are very familiar with one of our most southern states? It's an interesting place, and about the only thing that we're trying to do here with the Planning District Commission, and we are thinking regionally, is trying somehow to get legislation passed that will allow drive-through daiquiri bars in Virginia. I don't know how you all survive without that. And it's on every corner in Louisiana. I could spend my 30 minutes talking about how crazy things are down there.
We'll load a bus tonight and head down there. Field trip is in order, yes.
The law is, for those who aren't familiar, the law is you get your daiquiri through the drive-through window, but they leave the little piece of paper on the top of the straw so that it maintains to be a closed container. So you're basically promising not to take that little piece of paper off before you get home. But it's an interesting place. I'm sure I learned more about government and politics in 6 years in Louisiana than I ever learned in college or anywhere else. It's a unique place. I've loved every second of living here. 3 years this month. I moved to take the job as the director of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District. My wife is a native of Harrisonburg, did her undergraduate work here at UVA, but she still lives and teaches at LSU in Baton Rouge, so I get the best of both worlds. I get to live here year-round, but still go down there for football every fall, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Keep an eye on the time here, because I could talk for hours about what all we're doing at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District. So much of it is very much the same as Nancy was saying. We work to bring people together. We work to facilitate, we work to convene, we work to bring new ideas, especially in the areas of regional cooperation. We just recently held some meetings where it was determined, because we do serve and we're here for our local governments. And for our local governments, we still represent City of Charlottesville, Albemarle County, Nelson County, Greene County, Fluvanna, and Louisa. Our board members, we're equally divided there. We've got 2 representatives from each one of our local governments. We've got Ms. Jenny Keller, who represents the City of Charlottesville, who is our current treasurer and soon-to-be chairperson of our commission. And but with the predominance of all of our work to be on regional issues, we do a lot of local issues as well, because we're always having to chase that dollar so that we can stay alive. If anything has happened over the last, especially 10 years, it is having federal money being decreased to levels that really is hindering services. Not the planning services, but the actual implementation on the street. The HOME program, which is a housing and urban development program to assist with affordable housing, in the last 8 years, it's been cut by 70% from HUD. 70%. That's there's discussion right now in the administration of completely cutting it altogether, but after being cut 70%, there's not a whole lot much left there to cut. So luckily that if it does happen, it won't affect us. But so we've been spending a lot more time trying to work for our local governments directly. And we recently, in looking at our FY18 budget, we've determined that we should be spending 75% of our time on regional issues and 25% of our time working directly for our local governments, trying to do individual projects for them, but everything else is regional. As I said, I've just recently moved from Baton Rouge. I worked in the mayor's office there, overseeing community and economic development as well as redevelopment projects. Baton Rouge, it's a consolidated government where both the parish or county and the city of Baton Rouge is one consolidated government, but we also included 4 cities. So we had 500,000 people with a number of cities, towns, and one parish. So we worked a lot, as well as, of course, Louisiana State University and Southern University. And so partnering, regionalism there became just a way of life for us, and it really started to transition with my role here with the Thomas Jefferson Planning District. We try really hard. A lot of our major goals are in consensus building, creating partnerships, providing some services, and problem solving between governing bodies. I was really appreciative. You've got a really good handle on a lot of the regional issues with your responses, but there are a number of others, solid waste, landfills, that are very, very big opportunities and needs. Economic development, another agency that was born out of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District, is the Central Virginia Partnership for Economic Development, which covers our entire region, plus the Rapidan-Rappahannock Planning Commission going north of us. A number of other things, agencies have remained the same. Some things have changed. We don't spend as much time on the issues of the accords on the sheet that you have. Transportation is by far the biggest activity and undertaking that we participate in. Just today, Diantha and I spent at least a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours, with a joint project, a very positive project between the city of Charlottesville, Albemarle County, VDOT, and our Metropolitan Planning Organization, working on the planning around hydraulic and US Route 29 intersection. It's to me a perfect example of how regionalism at a small scale can work. It's a huge project, but where 2 local governments, you've got an intersection of a very busy major highway. 3/4 of the intersection is one local government, city of Charlottesville. 1/4 is Albemarle County. You really can't develop that area with Charlottesville going in one direction and Albemarle going in another, and then try to determine how $100 million worth of transportation improvements should best be spent when you've got 2 completely different needs. So this is a perfect example of what should be happening, and a perfect example of how well it's happening. And so this project is really, really working well. It was very similar with the Route 29 work that's been going on so far. While the majority of it is in the Albemarle County, a very large portion is in the city of Charlottesville. And there are not many times, I guess I've been doing this for 25 years or so, where we have a $150 million project that's getting completed under budget and 4 months ahead of schedule. Boy, if anything says regionalism and partnership works, projects like that just scream it. So things really do work well. Just tell you a little bit about the Thomas Jefferson Planning District today. We are doing a lot of the same things with facilitation and convening. We have 11 full-time staff. We're located just right here on the mall on Water Street. Our 11-member staff that includes some CPAs, engineers, communications experts, public administration, which is me. I'm not a planner. Everybody, even when I was a city manager in Maryland and South Carolina, everybody just thought I was a planner. But my background is in public administration, but of course we are predominantly urban planners. We're in the best location, I think, in the world for keeping, retaining, and finding very, very good urban planners. We recently had an opening where we had 40 applicants. We shortlisted it to 3, had interviews, and the selection panel walked out of the last interview going, just flip a coin, we'll take any of the 3. We really don't care. They were that good. And they were all UVA grads. They are all coming to work for us at probably less than market rate, but they know how nice it is here. They do not want to leave. So it's a great place to be, and we take advantage of it. And they really bring some creative ideas, which we're trying to pursue. For instance, one of our UVA grads came up with the idea, and at last year's Tom Tom Festival, we developed a Better Block program, which is a pilot program, as Nancy mentioned, we do a lot of, where we on 2nd Street, we created chalked bike pedestrian lanes, temporary signs, change configurations of the on-street parking for one day, just one day, to see how it worked. And the creative minds of the young people that we're able to work with, on their own, they got a friend to come in and hover over it with a drone. So we have an hour's worth of overhead shots of seeing the traffic patterns in both vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian of how it works. I love new technology. It's really adding so much more to what you can do with planning, because you don't have to guess so much anymore. I mean, we can look at a video and see the habits that people will take. This is a neat project because by Sunday, all the chalk, everything was gone, and we were back to normal, but we were able to make a recommendation to the city of, here are some changes that you may want to consider making. So it's a really, really fun time. The not so fun part is we still have to pay the bills. And so we're always chasing dollars. We're always trying to stay afloat. We've been doing very, very well the last few years. As much as we like to chase the dollars to stay afloat, we have learned, though, that we never chase those dollars outside of our mission. We have noticed some nonprofits, other PDCs even, start to get into areas because there's money available, but it's not really in their wheelhouse. It's not really in their mission, and they start to get mission creep that sometimes can't be stopped. No matter how good the money is in some areas, we stay away from it. We try to stay within the focus areas that we have here, and that is predominantly transportation. Right now for us, though, we are expecting a $2 million budget for FY18. Of that $2 million, less than 8% of it comes from our local member governments. Everything else comes federal, state, or doing private contracts. With the majority of it, almost 60%, is all federal money. What do we do with that money? Our commission adopted a strategic plan back in 2015, just after I first got there. It's a very short plan, it's for 3 years. We were overcoming a few financial obstacles at the time from a project that didn't go so well. And so the strategic plan really dominated around fiscal management. And with a really good staff and a really good commission, we've been able to overcome those obstacles where we're starting to do some really neat things. As I said earlier, first and foremost, transportation. That's what we do the most of. Our MPO is our most active department within the PDC. And some of the projects that we're doing right now that are especially regional in nature is certainly the hydraulic planning process. We've also been working with Meredith on making sure that we maintain and develop and grow our Amtrak station here in Charlottesville. That's a regional project that's not just Charlottesville and Albemarle, it's the entire Commonwealth and the entire eastern seaboard that's very, very crucial. Hopefully you all know by now, but as part of the Route 29 Solutions funding, we were able to receive an additional Amtrak rail set. So we'll have a new rail service that'll run from Lynchburg to DC through Charlottesville. And the Amtrak service here is so good. Our big problem is our station isn't big enough to hold it, by far, not even close. So we've been working with the state and with Amtrak to try to solve that problem. Again, one of our big transportation projects. The other is our really good young urban planners are working on a bike ped, a regional bike ped plan right now. They're also working with, every 5 years, we have to update our long-range transportation plan for the MPO, which is the majority of Albemarle County and all of the city of Charlottesville. No federal money can be spent on a road project or transportation project in our MPO that hasn't been approved by the MPO. It has to be in their long-range transportation plan, and they have to approve those projects. So it's a very, very important document. Nothing on Route 29 could have occurred had it not been in a long-range transportation plan. Luckily, but also unfortunately, many of those projects have been in that plan for decades. Well planned out, well thought out, finally got the money, but still it had to be in that plan. I'll really open it up to you. If anybody would like to participate in regional planning, those two projects alone, the bike ped plan and the long range transportation plan, we would love to find a place for you on a volunteer list or committee or work towards that. Both of those will take about 18 months of work. They're very methodical, a lot of community engagement. It's just kind of coming to mind. I'm not too sure that community engagement is becoming our #1 activity. And it's very strong here in the Charlottesville, Albemarle area, and which is the way it should be. So we do a lot of public meetings. Those are two areas that we do. Some of the other things, we certainly, regionally, we consolidate our transportation planning with the rural areas. While they don't follow the same guidelines as the MPO does for federal money, for state projects, you still have to have road projects listed in your rural plan to be able to receive state funding. We work very, very closely with Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and the rest of our member governments to start to get road funding through what's now the SMART scale application process. The state last year began a process. Virginia was just like most other states where there was a lot more politics in how you got road funding than it was criteria and future need. They changed that last year with something called SMART scale. Now there are about 5 rating criteria, and everybody around the Commonwealth competes for funds out of 2 pots of money. So we work with our local governments there to put together the best applications that we can, and a lot of times that means breaking down big projects. One of our biggest projects, biggest needs we have now after Route 29 is at exit 118 on 64 and 29. There's a long-term plan for that. It's about $140 million. That's out of a statewide pot of less than $1 billion. So we would have to get over 10% for one project, which won't happen. We break that down into smaller projects, working with our local governments to apply for it a piece at a time, kind of the old Johnny Cash song. We do things a lot like that. Most recently, and talk about a very positive partnership between the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, is we spent several months in reviewing the need for a regional transit something. I say something because we looked at a regional transit authority a number of years ago, and it really went nowhere. I've got huge binders behind my desk of this study that's been there for ages. What we were able to come together with the two localities was the recommendation to create an advisory board, begin with baby steps. And the City Council and Board of Supervisors unanimously approved that concept, and now it will be kicking off in July to August of this year. The goal is to, again, through a trial basis, have all of our transit systems, which is CAT, JAUNT, as well as the university, to work together, see how that goes. It may lead to an authority some years in the future, or it may work so well we go, man, why did we waste all that time even thinking about an authority? This is all it took. So we do a lot of things like that. One of the bigger issues, nobody mentioned it earlier, is a regional issue. I don't think I did either. Broadband. Our strategic planning process in 2015 said that broadband is one of our biggest issues. I won't say the biggest, because I explained to my commission that we weren't even voting on transportation. We get so much money, or we get the majority of our budget for transportation. There's no way I'm going to allow them to say that's not a priority, so I wouldn't even let them vote on it. But broadband was one of the top three. And so we've been working with all of our local governments. Very simply, you can't look at running a business, which broadband is, and say, okay, a jurisdictional boundary is here, so that's where you have to quit servicing and providing a service. I mean, nobody would run a business like that. Government can't run a business like that. So we're working to look at broadband to see how we can help local broadband service increase from a regional perspective. And so that's a new but also a very important regional project that we're working on. Number of individual projects. Greene County, we've got some really neat projects around Standardsville, helping with a streetscape project there. We also worked locally with Fluvanna County and was working with the town of Columbia before it was not a town again. But received a grant and will be removing about 5 homes that are currently in the floodplain there. And Fluvanna County will be able to create a park where those homes used to be. The Rivanna is another one of our priorities right now, regional. And so we're looking at planning and working with future development, whether it be agriculture, tourism, residential, or commercial development, all the way from the corner of Greene County down into Fluvanna County. So Rivanna River planning is, again, another one of our big priorities we've been working on most recently. The other thing not a lot of people know about that we do at the PDC is we have our own nonprofit. The PDC is a regional government. We're created by the state legislature, even though they chose not to fund us like a State Department. But we are still a governmental entity, which means our funding is very limited to governmental entities. So a number of years ago, under very, very strong leadership, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Corporation was created, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're able to go after funding and do projects that are only available to nonprofits. The other thing we've been doing most recently is helping small groups who are considering becoming a nonprofit or have an issue that they're after and don't have the need to be a nonprofit. We'll provide administrative and fiscal support for them. And for projects that they may have, we're also then able to, on a contractual basis, provide staffing. And we've been doing that for the Rivanna River Basin Commission for 2 years now. The final big project that we're beginning just in the last month to look at is affordable housing. We're looking in the direction that no one locality, especially in our region in Central Virginia, can really look at affordable housing alone. You've got to look out. The cost of housing differs so great. People travel so much for their work and for school and other things that affordable housing has to be looked at from a regional basis. And we're just beginning discussions of that now, so that during FY18 that will become one of our major programs. Hopefully that scratched the surface. Would love to have each and every one of you come to a board meeting first Thursdays every month except July and January, just right around the corner at 401 East Water Street. Don't be surprised if we look at you like you have two heads. We don't have visitors very often for our board meetings, which is good. Maybe it means things are going okay. About the only time I think, Jenny, we have them, we know they're students and they have to be there. But we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you come and, anytime to ask questions, find out more about us. A lot of good things. We have a lot of information on our website, and I look forward to answering any questions when our other speakers are done. Thank you.
We're tag teaming a little bit, so I'm gonna pass out some information that Mike and I are sort of sharing with you all, and we thought it was easier for you to have something in front of you than to just try and read it all, so you can just.
So I'll just begin by saying thanks. I think that this is a pretty cool new thing for the Road Forward PAC to not just be doing the trainings and so on, and the kind of political side. It's really wonderful to be getting into substance at this depth. And you see that, this is like a real embarrassment of riches that you have here. So I think Meredith and Cynthia, there's some colleagues here, Norman Dill, another supervisor in the county. This room is full of leaders in this. It would kind of take my whole talk to go through everybody in this room, and it's really a pleasure to be here with my colleague Diantha and with Chip and with Nancy O'Brien. In the city of Charlottesville, we have a lot of former mayors. Throw a rock. One under every mayor. Nancy's still one of the stand on the shoulders of giants. And she's one of the finest, and you heard a whole other chapter in her contribution to this region here. So it's really cool to hear that. Actually, there's a lot that you can see how much work has gone into building this region. So I thought I would start with a couple of thoughts just on why regionalism itself. I grew up in the Northern Virginia area, in Arlington, and the Council of Governments is a big deal up there. That's a organization, it's a nonprofit. It's, I think, just had its 60th anniversary. It's got 24 member localities, a staff of 150. It serves as kind of a think tank, an advocate, a convener, very much along the lines of what Chip was describing, but because that region is so much bigger, it is extremely robust, and it sets the mark for, like right now, they're really engaged in the metro kind of debacle up there, what's happening with how do they get all those localities to belly up and solve this public transportation problem, among other things, deal with a lot of homeland security issues. So I grew up sort of watching that in my backyard, and there were just a couple of factors coming into my first term on council and as mayor why this became a priority for me. We had a really interesting meeting before I came on with a guy named Robert Liberty, who's in Seattle, and he's a worldwide authority on regionalism and consults and advises, and he was coming here to do a talk at UVA, and I had there was a lunch with a bunch of folks with him, and he spoke very compellingly about how regionalism in the Seattle region had grown over time, and it did start with baby steps. And the governments in it, there were setbacks and advances, and it was highly, organic to that region, and the government's there, and the needs there, and the interests they had. And it just made a big impression on me coming in as one member of this body, as kind of a vision for where we could go. And that was one of the things that led to these memorandums of understanding that Diantha and I are both going to talk about. We sort of divided them up. Another factor was there are political there are political things happening between the city and the county that are favorable toward regionalism right now. Among others, the fact that the county is all members of one party, whether or not you agree with that party. I'm a Democrat. The Democratic Party now has all the seats. It does create a new opportunity for higher degrees of cooperation, like-mindedness, shared conversation, I think, than in the past. That doesn't mean that it solves all the problems. It doesn't, but it is a new factor. Mixing into that, you have other very interesting political realities between the two bodies that are, they're just challenges to think about. And in the county, they have magisterial districts, and we are at large in the city, while 5 of us represent the entire city. So we're coming to this enterprise with different constituencies and with different political realities. So, and the final thing was, it just seems to make common sense to cooperate and find efficiencies on areas where the policy issue travels across borders. And that was where this conversation that led to the MOUs. So I'm going to talk about 2 of them. Diantha's going to talk about a couple of them as well. There were 4 memorandums of understanding that we all passed. I think 3 months into the term last year in the spring. We have biannual summits that were started a couple of years ago between the city and the county, where twice a year, all the members of the board and all the members of the council get together, and there's a prepared agenda. There's a lot of work that goes into them. And at this meeting that we had, we unanimously passed these 4 memorandums of understanding. A lot of work had gone into them beforehand, and they were picked very carefully. So I'm going to talk about 2 of them, which is education and natural environment. And Diantha will talk about a couple others. She has got a whole other set of things that she's going to address too, about existing areas of cooperation between the city and the county. But so with education and the environment, there were 2 areas of education that were interesting to us that travel across boundaries. One was pre-K and one was career and vocational education. So if you think about those populations, they're really fluid. The fact that you have these boundaries is irrelevant to a kid whose parents moved 2 or 3 times and is in a vulnerable early age and really needs pre-K education. It's not that material to somebody who needs career and vocational education, who might be moving around too, or might be driving backwards and forwards, and has a that's the nature of their life and their professional career. So those were 2 kind of areas of low-hanging fruit in starting to cooperate more in this new era between the city and the county. So there was a lot of work, and I think one of the kind of cool things for us was, so we passed these MOUs in the meeting last year, gave them to staff, said come back to us with areas of cooperation. They came back to us in the fall. There was a lot happening in that particular meeting. Then we said, great, this all sounds good. We probably need one more meeting where we're going to move ahead and give you the thumbs up on all these areas of cooperation and efficiency and harmony and so on. And then staff did that in the meeting this year, and we all I think it was unanimous approval to go forth and work on them. And I'm going to talk about, so in the education memorandum of understanding, this language is common basically to all of them. There were some tweaks, but there were really, the action is in 6 bullets, which was City Council, Charlottesville Board of Supervisors, the county, agree to this MOU, directing the respective city manager. And you all know the form of government we have. We're the boards of directors, we have the full-time CEO, and we set policy, do the budget, do public engagement, but they're really in charge of implementation and directing their staffs to work on stuff. So to designate a staff member assigned to promoting success, identify potential available resources available to both localities, identify and consider potential efficiencies through harmonization, identify and consider potential impacts on each other's jurisdiction of acting with or without information sharing where appropriate, identify mutually beneficial ways to cooperate and communicate where possible, and consider recommendations of the pre-K task force. So that was something that, there was a little tweak in this. Some of the language is pretty identical in these. And when staff came back to us, there was a whole, spreadsheet of areas. I've got a whole bunch here that they identified. There was a category short-term implementation with no significant resource or policy changes, but areas where direction from the governing bodies was needed to get staff moving ahead, but it didn't require new budgetary items, for instance. And then there was another category of long-term implementation that requires either significant resources or policy changes. So just a couple items to highlight for you. One was city-county career centers, satellite centers of the Piedmont Workforce Network focused on our region. And they identified increased collaboration with libraries in the county to expand career center services beyond the current location. The county's Department of Social Services, modeled after the city center and the library right here. We've got a career center right there. And it said these initiatives should be accomplished within the next 12 months. Initial contact has already been made with the Jefferson and Madison Regional Library Executive Director, has indicated support for the concept. There's another one, increased partnership in conducting regional job fairs and in training, placing local residents. This would be a joint initiative. Implementing this can be accomplished within existing staff resources, would involve a coordinated approach between city and county economic development offices and the Piedmont Workforce Network. There was the Early Education Task Force, which is doing a ton of good work right now. Talked about developing a shared pre-K application for Charlottesville, Albemarle, and Head Start. They have created and announced the common application. There was home visiting collaborative. The bodies need to receive a presentation on the fiscal map. There was the consider increased support. This was a longer term, increased support for 0 to 3-year-olds, and they identified for us this is 12 to 18 months horizon, requires considerable investment by funders and expansion of scope by the task force, other entity. Then there was transportation of PVCC and KTEC from low-income neighborhoods, Southwood, Friendship Court. They identified this as a difficult hurdle. There's a whole bunch, I'm kind of skimming over a lot here. And they said implementation will require a policy director and resource commitment from the Board of Supervisors and City Council. City-county career centers, talked about expanding the GO. This is a very successful program we have, Growing Opportunity, where we're trying to expand it. The county is interested in exploring expanding it. This really is a joint learning initiative because we're still trying to get this right. And we do have, there are GO programs where they're gonna work in the county. They're gonna, it's kind of a curated mentorship and apprenticeship program where we know that there's a number of jobs, like we did it with certified nurse assistants at UVA, and we create a program and train these folks, and then they go right into jobs, and we did it with bus drivers too. So it says implementation will require Board of Supervisors to provide policy direction and resource commitments, and then the city would be involved in this, and there's a conversation happening. So this is an example of, some of these are smaller, some of them are bigger. They will involve a conversation and collaboration, harmony, efficiencies that weren't happening before this. So one of the things about us sort of growing together is getting our staffs to start to work more closely together. There has been a history in certain cases of not that between the different staffs. So it helps when the governing bodies are saying, look, let's start to grow together. This is the lesson that I got from the presentation with the guy that I mentioned from the Seattle region, was it really did take, over the course of time, very similar to what Chip was talking about with the Regional Transportation Partnership, it does take, a forcing function to get the collaboration and the integration started between the different staffs, and that's a policy matter. So that's education. Second one was the environment, and these, there's sort of recitations at the top about City of Charlottesville, County of Albemarle have recognized that protecting natural resources, clean water, biodiversity, tree cover, foster livable, sustainable, resilient communities. We mentioned greenhouse gas emissions. We mentioned populations similarly impact and benefit from natural resources. So the action items here were designate staff member, identify potential available resources available to both localities, potential efficiencies through harmonization, potential impacts on each other's jurisdiction, acting with or without information sharing, mutually beneficial ways to cooperate and communicate where possible. So staff came back to both bodies with a few others. Ravenna Solid Waste Authority talks about composting program, UVA City County currently collaborating with RSWA to pilot a strategy to support local compostable collection model. Need for additional resources associated with longer-term strategies are to be evaluated. So this is the kind of thing that comes back to us frequently. Dozens of items come to us throughout the course of the year for the governing bodies to act on, and so it's identified, pushed forward here. Joint solid waste management plan, committing to meet on a regular basis twice a year to review and track work plan progress and opportunities. Water quality compliance, it says staff time will be needed to draft cost share principles to guide partnering agreements for future projects, finalize a city-county agreement for sharing costs and credits for a specific near-term project at the Riverrun neighborhood and Penn Park. Local climate action planning process, LCAP. It talks about city-county UVA staff to reconvene team and review and identify status, opportunities related to the framework. It talks about the county. We just got the Soul Smart designation, which was really cool, and it says the county's interested in this too, and we're having, this is an ongoing conversation where we learn from each other. Green infrastructure planning, it's a county and city to receive a report sometime this year from the technical assistance consultant, and then that will in turn develop a biodiversity action plan, and then longer term green infrastructure planning, jointly develop a regional needs assessment for recreational and alternative transportation opportunities. It says this is a much longer term exercise. Recommendations to address outcomes will include both short and long term strategies. Some wonky language in there, but we're talking, this is big kind of real strategic goals that the two. And then the Rivanna River is kind of a really big one. I talked about this in my campaign, and we have a June 2019 deadline to adopt an updated joint river corridor plan. I think this is a really exciting area for the city and county to cooperate on, because just greenhouse gases, the river, they're both flowing through boundaries. So that's an example of some of the outtakes from these. And then the final thing that I was going to touch on was, so we had the 4 MOUs, environment, education, and then redevelopment, housing, and transportation. So what we didn't do in the beginning with these 4 was economic development. And one of the reasons was, let's start with baby steps. The assumption with neighboring localities is that you compete for cool companies to situate in one or the other. However, now that we've sort of gotten this going, we had we've all had conversations on our own, sometimes I have an individual conversation. You find yourself talking to yourself sometimes when you're involved in local government. But a lot of conversations over the last year about economic development and how could we start doing this regionally. So Diantha and I both serve on the Planning and Coordinating Council, PAC, which has representation from the city, county, and the university. And Norman was there too. That's the representation we have. And we had a really interesting meeting recently where we started talking with, and Terry Sullivan was there, and Pat Hogan, the COO of the university. And it was I think that we had talked beforehand about talking about this, but there was a nice brainstorming quality where we really started thinking about how could we have a conversation longer term about the needs and wants of both bodies on economic development. I think we're all bringing different things to the table. I had a conversation with Bill Crutchfield, who's a major economic force in the region. He has a 500-person company near the airport in the county, and has been on the Daily Progress Board of Directors and a number of other things. And he said, just a conversation, he said, I think that it would really benefit the city and the county to have longer-term strategic planning about the economy, because if you look at what's happening in Charlottesville, the fundamental dynamic we have is we are 10 square miles and we have a supply and demand problem on almost everything we have, because a lot of people are coming into cities nowadays. So our population has gone up 12% in 6 years, and in a small city, a lot of things are going to become more expensive unless you increase the supply of them. So you're seeing that with traffic and parking, commercial space, residential space. And that, if you look a generation or two ahead, we are limited in a lot of ways in terms of the space that we have. So it would make sense. The county, conversely, is, through no fault of their own, dealing with this city dynamic, which is fairly recent. So figuring out what to do with the spaces that the county has and the way that the region is. It could be that there are large companies, or that there are relations between where people live and where they work, or that some employer would come here and find that they'd want a solution where we're working together. Or that the university wants to talk to both localities about what does it want, what are its wants and needs when they look at something like the research park, or when they look at the innovation district and the biotech companies are spinning off. So all we really agreed to do was have another conversation about wants and needs, and to just start this process. But it could be that coming out of this, we do have a strategic plan where we have agreed to agree on a few things and to get working on some things. There are inevitably going to be areas where we disagree with each other. I think that one of the it's just like on city council, we have divided votes all the time, but we work together also all the time. So one of the things that I've really realized in this process is that we do like each other, we are friends, we are doing a ton of stuff together, and there are still going to be areas, like on each of our bodies, where we have disagreements on policy. And the question is, how do we negotiate those? How do we come to a resolution? And how do we kind of put it in the same context with all the other wonderful projects that we're collaborating on? And that is the same challenge that we face in the City Council in Charles Hall every week. So I think that we're doing a good job actually on figuring out moving forward on all these different fronts, and the MOUs are a big part of the new chapter in this relationship. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn over
I'm going to use the stool. Because I'm short. Good evening. I have to admit that I have been so busy the last couple of weeks writing letters to Mike that I haven't had a chance to write a speech for you guys. So I hope my remarks tonight are not too disjointed. But I think I will wake you up in a few minutes, because just like Rachel Maddow, I'm going to make you a signature drink. Just teasing, but I thought maybe I'd get your attention. Well, it would be fun if we could do that, though. Yeah. If you look at and I'll try to step back, the handout that we passed out on the front page, don't worry, I'm not going to read you all of these, but if you notice, there are actually 30 boards, commissions, and authorities that have representation appointed by the city and the county together. So these are very interesting. Some of them I knew about before I was a supervisor. I have to admit, some of them I didn't even realize existed. But I thought it might be fun for you guys to take a look at them. I did not realize that, for example, there was a public defender or citizens advisory committee, and I guess it makes perfect sense. I just never really thought about it. On the back of that page, you'll also see the top section are agencies that are supported by our review process that are actually funded jointly by the city and the county, which is pretty interesting list. And these particular agencies each year go through a process that's pretty strenuous, I would say. And they meet the qualifications. There's a panel that reviews them that is convened, that is participatory by both of us. It doesn't have elected officials on it, but it is a panel from the city and the county. And they determine the organizations that are funded. And of course, every year we do hear from some of the organizations that don't make the list or the cut. But regardless, so this is a funding collaboration. Then, of course, most of you are familiar with the joint services that are funded by the city and the county. CAT, John, McIntyre Recycling Center, the library, ECC, our jail, of course, Public Defender's Office, Foothill Child Advocacy Center, and the SPCA. And then the very last one at the bottom are the cultural centers, which really is, to me, a lot more fun and interesting. But so our cultural institutions that also receive funding from the city and the county. And I know many of you are involved in many of these exciting Festival of the Blood, Virginia Film Festival. So pretty impressive lists, I think, of things that we actually pay for together with taxpayer dollars, and of course some state and federal dollars added in there as well. Just want to start by saying that Albemarle County used to be a small little bedroom community around Charlottesville. And where we are right now is that we can no longer remain the bedroom community. Albemarle County has more people in our urban ring than Charlottesville has in its city. So, and with the cutbacks in state and federal dollars, and we all believe, I think, in this room that that's only going to get worse. If we don't start working together, we're going to all sink. I mean, it's like we need to work together, and the university, we're hoping, will be a part of that. Certainly the university has been a huge driver in this community for many years, economic driver. But I think they're starting to realize that their federal dollars and state dollars are diminishing as well. And so if we can all work together, it's going to lift all boats. And it just makes good sense. And I think Mike was talking about that very nicely with the economic development piece. You think about the city has businesses that want to grow, but no land. We have the land that they may be able to grow into. So if we work together, it's really a win-win for everybody. The challenge in Albemarle is that we need to increase our business revenues so that we don't have to keep increasing our property taxes. And right now, the city of Charlottesville has a much healthier ratio of business to residential revenues from taxes. And so Albemarle County really needs to get that business revenue tax base up, so that I don't have to keep saying to Cynthia, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pay more taxes next year. We need the businesses to help us share with that load.
Quit saying that.
Exactly, right. That's exactly right. But we want to do it the right way. We want to be very deliberate. Nobody wants to just go out and see unbridled growth. Albemarle County's grown about 6% in the last 8 years. You all are at 12%. Hence, you start to feel all of that traffic in this area and all the congestion. And am I talking about regionalism? I guess I am. Is this legitimate? Yeah, okay, good. We know that we're partnering with TJPDC, we're partnering with our planning commissions are partnering together. Mac, I think, can attest to, and Jenny, to the fact that the planning commissions get together and talk from both regions. So there's just so much work that's going on that doesn't play out in the paper, and but that is supporting our lives. Mike pointed out the fact that the city councilors represent the whole city. And in Albemarle County, the dynamic is different, and it plays out a little differently as well, because we have magisterial districts. So because I represent a good portion of the urban ring, which is very dense and has different challenges than someone who might represent a great deal of the rural area. I mean, just pick Salem or Whitehall. So to some degree, the supervisors are, while we're all looking out after Albemarle County, we're also each have our own challenges within our own districts that we have to worry about. Norman has a good portion of all of that Pantops growth in that urban ring as well, so which is a very different challenge than you would have way out in our rural areas. Let me see, I'm just checking my notes here. So let me move on then to transportation. You have one of the MOUs over transportation. And I think Chip did a really nice job in mentioning that a lot of the transportation piece. We did, of course, agree to the MOU on transportation, and this MOU includes automobile, transit, pedestrian, biking, and rail. There you go, Meredith. We're right now working, as Chip referenced, on the small area plan around hydraulic to try and get that intersection The hydraulic intersection is actually one of the most dangerous intersections in the state of Virginia. We have to fix it. We have to do something. But we want to make sure as we fix it that we make it pedestrian friendly, bike friendly, but we have to get the traffic through. So Albemarle County owns, for lack of a better word, but we have the Stonefield corner, and the rest of it is the city of Charlottesville. So this is a real joint project to try and figure out what we're going to do around that intersection to help move you all through there more efficiently in the future. And the regional partnership, the regional transit partnership that Chip mentioned is also really critical. We're at the point in the county where CAT no longer really meets the needs of our citizens. And we have urgent transit issues for our community because we've grown so much in the urban ring. And people say, well, the CAT buses are empty. Well, we need to figure out together how to better route them so that they're full and they're getting cars off the road and congestion off the road. And we're going to do that together with this partnership. I'm really anxious about it because so many of my folks are in the urban ring and would like to have access to a good transit system. But I'm not going to go through all of this for you right now. So the next one that's of interest, or that we need to go over, actually the last one, is redevelopment and affordable housing. This particular topic is very much talked about right now. Matter of fact, if you read the paper the other day, you saw that Impact talked to the elected officials this last week about affordable housing for the elderly. And I think that's a big concern of theirs and certainly of ours. But affordable housing in this area is a real concern for a lot more than just the elderly folks. It's a concern for everybody, for many, many people. Our planning commission, I think, plans to meet about affordable housing. We have Albemarle County specifically we've lost our proffers because the General Assembly decided to take away the proffers that developers were giving us towards affordable housing. So Albemarle County we've convened a working group that's made up of citizens and developers to try and figure out how we're going to close that gap of monies that we're going to be missing that we've previously been using for affordable housing. So we have that work going on right now. Part of the one thing that I'm not sure, I certainly didn't realize when I moved up from the school board to the board of supervisors, I didn't realize that the monies that we receive from the state and federal government from the city or to the city and the county are different. The city is recognized because it's a city as, and it sounds kind of ugly, and I don't mean it this way, but it's called an entitlement city, which means that because it's a city, the state and federal government consider you entitled to automatically receive money for affordable housing. So the city automatically gets money for affordable housing. It's not enough, but at least it's something. Interestingly enough, because we're a county, Albemarle County has to compete. We don't just get money automatically, we have to compete with all the other counties and areas that are not entitlement cities for the limited dollars that we receive. And we have to check all certain boxes. It's just like any other bureaucratic process. So we may or may not, in any given year, receive the funds that we apply for, which puts us in very different places as far as our funding stream. A couple of other things about affordable housing. The county does receive vouchers, and I think you all do too, although I'm not so sure. I mean, I hate to speak for the city, but I think you do too. The voucher money for affordable housing has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller because it hasn't been increased since I think the first Bush, maybe it was the second Bush administration, but anyway, one of the Bush administrations. So while we still get the vouchers, the amount of money, so they don't go as far as they used to. And I can't imagine that under this current administration, they're gonna all of a sudden be increased, but maybe so. So those are a couple of specific conundrums for the county that's a little different than the city as far as affordable housing dollars go. And of course, sometimes you feel like you're in this swirl because you want to, if you raise taxes to help provide affordable housing, then you're raising taxes on the very people who can't afford to, exactly. So you get into this. So, but we're working on it, and certainly we're working with the city as well, although we do have limitations on that particular issue and working together just because of our structural differences. What else do I need to say here, Mike? I think folks can pretty much take a look and see what these MOUs are about. And I think with that, I'm probably through, and maybe we can just open it up for our questions, if that's all right.
Great.
I do want to, let me just say though, that Mike is exactly right. Norman, Mike, myself, we all really appreciate each other and really consider each other friends. It's just like with husbands and wives and children and families. You're not always going to agree, and sometimes you have to go to court to get it settled. Or sometimes you just have to get in a room and say, okay, we're going to figure it out, and the last man standing wins. So who knows? But anyway, thank you very much.
Covered. First of all, I want to congratulate all of our speakers. Let's really give them a hand. And not just for the way they spoke and what they told us today, but for what they're actually doing for the community. I mean, and the way they're doing it. I think it's remarkable. And I also think it's awfully easy to pass judgment and come to conclusions that may not be accurate just from the news that's available to most of us. I would wager that most of you had no idea about the level of cooperation and collaboration that goes on, right? So I think this has been really, really helpful. It's easy to conclude that maybe we're always at each other's throats, but that's really not the case. And all right, so here's my question, and then we'll go into others. Is it working?
No, the battery has gone dead. We left it on.
I left it on?
No, I
Was
think
it?
that, I think I left it
Oh,
on.
goodness, okay. Well then, we'll put this down. No, we'll put this down and then.
Why don't you just repeat the question?
Yeah, that's the easiest way.
Oh, well, I can repeat the questions, but they have to answer them.
I used to teach school, I can project.
My question would be, what areas of coordination and cooperation between the University of Virginia and our jurisdictions are currently in place, and what are some additional areas that might be explored?
I can. It's interesting because, again, I hesitate to speak for Mike, but because I'm a woman, I will.
I'm used to it.
That's
Used to
right.
it.
Just easy. Mike and I both actually spoke to the university recently regarding the new president that they're going to be recruiting and hiring. And certainly one of the things that I said was that I really hope that that in the process of of looking for the candidate and the attributes, that we really get someone who is really wanting to and good at outreach to the community. I think in the past, to be honest with you, the University, Albemarle, and Charlottesville have all sort of been siloed. And we need to get past those silos. And I think they're realizing that as well. And I've forgotten what the question was now, but I know it was University of Virginia. So that would be one of my thoughts with the university. Outreach into the community would really be wonderful. There are models out there where university towns have real partnerships. Some universities provide affordable housing, some universities provide childcare, daycare, one transit system instead of 3. So we're going to continue to work with the university on some of those ideas, and I had a very receptive welcome from my remarks. So you want?
Just a quick, so what Diantha was referring to is the 2 of the folks who were chairing the search committee for the university reached out to us as electeds and had separate meetings about taking and they also did a couple, like a public forum, I think, recently. And it was I think that it showed how seriously they're taking this, which is the feedback of the 2 elected bodies. And we did have a chance to talk about it. And it's an answer that kind of cuts through a lot of different specific policy areas, which is, I totally agree that the university could take the level of consideration and collaboration with the neighboring localities to a higher level at all kinds of different. Students are hungering for it. I just did a presentation on Sunday to this Multicultural Students Association, this new multicultural center. These are, kids who very much belie the stereotype of, in the past of UVA as this sort of white Southern gentry school. I mean, they were South Asian and from all over the world, and hundreds, there are 500 people there at this. And a number came up to me afterward and said, we really want to be involved in the community, but they're kids and they're busy and their lives are structured by an administration, so they take cues from the institution, from the university. And so, it's one thing for me to say, well, come to a city council meeting. It's another thing when they get there to be invited to be part of the city and the county. And graduate students, faculty, and I do think there are dozens of areas of specific policy where the university, but for us, a particular interest is tech transfer and the companies that spin off through the intellectual property that is created by UVA professors and graduate students, and how do they see those companies that oftentimes set in the city, but also we're starting to go in the county. I mean, in the research park, but we've got 50 biotech companies now that are in the city. Those are almost all university related. And the question is, what's the bigger strategy for these sorts of companies? Do they want them to grow here, stay here? Do we have an ask to the university and their approach on tech transfer? And it's a conversation that I've been starting recently through this advisory council that I have, that the provost is involved in. And I think that it'll be like when I meet with the new president, whatever that happens, I'll definitely want to know where they're going on this.
Could I just say, there are examples of universities cooperating so that the people that work in them can afford housing.
Yes.
Penn State has been doing this for 50 years, and it costs them no money, and so somebody could look into that. And right down in Norfolk, I think it's Norfolk, I get those places confused, but it's on the Eastern Shore. ODU has put up housing, and there are tax credits, and I would advise, if you want to look into this, you need to get in touch with VHDA, because they know all the players, and they would love to be helpful.
That's right. But I'm very hopeful. I mean, I really am, so.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, there are things out there.
There are models, yeah.
No, there are actual houses.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Actual
yeah,
houses.
yeah.
So, I would just say, someone, the staff person who's in charge of that's been named, really needs to talk to some of those people at VHDA, and because there are several other funding sources, but they know where they all are. So I would invite them in to have that conversation with you. I know that they would love to do that.
All right.
Chip, I know that you were once with an organization that promoted town gown relations. So
I promise to speak very, very briefly. Yes, I was lucky enough to be a founder for an international nonprofit out of Clemson South Carolina, the International Town and Gown Association. There are thousands of those examples. Duke University bought almost an entire neighborhood around their campus in Durham to do that. Examples of shared fire departments, shared transit systems. Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles allowed the university police to become deputized to provide additional law enforcement outside of the campus, but in the immediate areas. So very much at the PDC level, one of the things we've been looking at is following Blacksburg's model. Blacksburg received state legislation that allows Virginia Tech to sit on their board. We currently do not have that, but it may be something that would be of joint interest, and so that a decision maker at the university level would be part of all of our regional discussions.
That'd be great. That'd really be good.
We do, I think, have some representation on our planning commissions from
We
the
do.
university.
Yes, we do, on both.
The University Architect sits on the City Planning Commission and also on the County Planning Commission.
That's right.
Not as a voting member.
No, non-voting.
Right, thank you. Here's another question. Are services distributed proportionately to revenues between rural and urban? I.e., are monies and services meted out according to source of revenue or need? Yeah. Are services distributed proportionately to revenues between rural and urban?
Why don't we get clarification?
Yeah, is that, yeah,
I think that's.
just curious as to.
That was my question. I was just curious, just to get to the basics, the population of Albemarle County versus the population of Charlottesville, tax revenues of one versus the other, and, you know, in regionalism, those are going to be intermixed a bit. And I mean, it's how you sort that out. And of course, we all know that, you know, roads are a common thing, we all contribute, it's all part of the whole, and so I don't know whether there's a way to sort this out or not.
So, I think the quick answer is that many of where we're sharing services, the formulas are often by population. Yes. If you think about the city has control of their own roads and a highway. Well, I guess you have a highway. Do you have a highway? Of your own roads. For the county, we operate with VDOT roads. So we don't have, now while we can prioritize with VDOT what we think is important, VDOT actually controls all of the Albemarle County roads as far as paying for them and funding them. So that's a big difference right there. Now, we do, and I guess I have to qualify that a little bit, because we do put revenue sharing money in, so we have a one-to-one match, and we do have a certain amount of money we put towards roads, but it's a very little. A few years ago, we were receiving, I think it was about, my old brain, something like $3 million for transportation in Albemarle County, and I think we're down now to like 300,000. So, isn't that right, Mac? Something like that. So, while Albemarle County does put some taxpayer money into roads, it's a very small amount, and a lot of it is really a one-to-one match or a revenue sharing match in some form or another. But certainly we don't have the department that takes care of roads as the city does. Does that help? I mean, does that answer your question?
It does. It's just that I don't know what the difference in population, Albemarle County population is what vis-a-vis.
Oh, okay. Albemarle's population is about 106,000, some close, and you all are about, what, 49?
A little close to 59, 49, yeah.
Yeah, 49.
And so the revenues consequently for Albemarle are huge in comparison. to Charlottesville or?
The tax rate's
Charlottesville
lower.
versus-
Well, the tax rate's lower in Elmore, higher in the city, so, I mean, sorry.
On the services, when you're doing this list here of funding, don't you, aren't the applications based on the service given? And aren't then your funding, they are asking for you to fund them at a certain level to provide a certain level of service in your area? Or is that not the way they're done? That's another aspect of this.
I guess which ones are you talking about?
Any one of them that you give, like.
Through the ARB, you mean?
Yeah, whatever. That the ones that go through your system,
They're requesting the amount of money.
they tie the revenue they ask for from you to the services they give
Yes.
in your area.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're funding services in another jurisdiction for that group.
Right, that's right. And the other thing too you have to remember is that because we're in Albemarle, we don't provide trash service like perhaps you all do. And I don't know how that works, but we have fewer services in the county than you do in the city provided. You know, everybody in the county pays for their own trash and they use different haulers and
Snow removal.
Snow removal is very different, you know, we all are doing our own, so sidewalk, Christmas trees, yeah, the list goes on. So there are much fewer services provided in the county than the city provides, hence they have a higher tax rate.
And for each of I think another part of your question, I'm actually gonna do something dangerous, which is not know the specifics of what I'm getting into, but for each of the things where we do have an operating agreement, we each contribute an amount of money to it. I think that's one of the things you're getting to. So the airport authority, JADE, the drug enforcement task force that we have, library board, each of I'm actually not sure, I mean, if we had the budget in front of us, I would know the figures about the jail, like how much you all
Yeah,
put
and
in
I
the jail.
can't speak to
But for instance, like so we each agreed this year to put money into the new senior center. They agreed to do their ask to us based on population. So you all agreed to a higher amount than we did, as opposed to going halfsies, because in that case the population made sense. So it was but I think each one of these is a negotiation, is a decision based on the bodies, based on the need, which is I think where Nancy was.
Yeah,
Nancy was going.
and often it's population, sometimes it's by service. So for the senior center, the county provided $2 million towards their capital, and the city provided $1.2 million. Because we have more seniors belonging to the senior center. Matt?
That ownership of the roads has a lot to do with the bike ped infrastructure. Because Albemarle County can't say, you know, block off this much of the road for bicycles. And many of the roads in Albemarle County, the property line comes up right to the edge of the road. So you'd have to get easements. So it does have a great effect.
Yeah, Mac's right, part of the problem we have with the bike connections and actually putting in a lot of connections and paths, you know, bike trails or even hiking trails, we have to purchase right-of-way, and often people don't want to give up right-of-way. So it's not just a lack of political will, it is actually sometimes just we have to wait until we can get the right-of-ways.
Okay, I think it's time to wrap up tonight. I think we could probably go on, and this has been really very informative and fascinating. And I think a little encouraging because, as I say, sometimes we get an impression about things from the headlines that isn't true. So, thank you very much. Our next session is May 11th, right here, 7 to 9 p.m. on public education. And you'll be getting notices, so look for the makeup of our speakers. Thank you.